Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Amber Rains. I am your host for today for Career Cloud. Thank you for tuning in. Career Cloud is hosted by Give Specific. And today we have Captain Andrea Lewis with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I am so excited about this interview. And what I will do is go ahead and start by reading your bio, and then we will jump right into it. Captain Andrea Lewis grew up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and is a graduate of Tucker High School. Andrea comes from a family of aviators. Her mother, Sharon, worked with Delta for over 40 years before retiring this year. Her father, James, was a 14-year veteran pilot in the Marine Corps before continuing to fly for American Airlines, with his career spanning over 22 years. Andrea is a graduate of the University of Georgia, where she completed a degree in French studies. She then followed her mother's footsteps by starting a career in the aviation industry as a flight attendant. Andrea became a flight attendant with the Air Force Reserves in 2010, making her only the second civilian hired as an Air Force flight attendant. She then went to work for Delta Airlines in 2011 as a flight attendant. After deciding to become a pilot, she began the process of applying for a Georgia Air National Guard pilot role and was accepted into the 116th Air Control Wing in 2014. She finished pilot training in 2017, making history by officially becoming the first Black female pilot in the Georgia Air National Guard. Today, she is a new first officer on the CRJ-200 with Endeavor Air. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Oh, that was so nice. It was well done.
Thank you. I am so excited to have you on Career Cloud. We look forward to the wealth of knowledge that you're going to provide. And I'm so excited for a number of reasons. You know, growing up, learning about history makers such as Bessie Coleman, and now to watching you make history in real time, I think you are the perfect example of normalizing excellence, which is the premise of Career Cloud. So I thought we would begin with your career path. So from Black women aviators such as Bessie Coleman to even Captain Stephanie Johnson with Delta Airlines, we know that Black women pilots represent less than half or 1% of the total pilot career field, according to one nonprofit that focuses on sisters or Black women in the aviation industry, which is Sisters of the Sky. So I wanted to highlight this nonprofit, and let's just go right in. And can you tell me a little bit about your career path and what led you to the role you're in today?
Yeah, and I first like to say I am a member of Sisters of the Skies, and I love them. It is a great organization. So they have a great mentor program as well. If you aren't a professional pilot with at least a commercial rating, and you're still working towards that, or you have interest in becoming a pilot, they have a great mentor program. But it's a great networking group of ladies that are doing, you know, what we all do. So anyways, I just wanted to say that about Sisters of the Skies. But yeah, so what got me to, you know, become this pilot, this aviator, I guess, is that, you know, I didn't always know that I was going down this path. When I was in college, when I was about to graduate from the University of Georgia with a degree in French out of all degrees, you know, my dad looked at me and he was like, all right, you're about to graduate, so here's all your bills, you know, and I was like, oh, I need a job. I had no idea what I was going to do. Honestly, I was graduating from college and I had no idea. And so my dad, having had served previously, you know, as a veteran, he was like, well, you should go and join the military. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not trading in my stilettos for combat boots. That's totally not a thing. You got to be crazy. But there's, and I always tell, when I speak to kids or, young students, I always tell them, like, your parents might always be right, or at least they might be 95% of the time right. So maybe listen to what your parents have to say. So there were some things growing up that I wish that I would have listened to my dad on. So I was like, let me not make this another time. So I started
Parents
researching.
will love this. Parents will
I
love
know. Look, the parents are always like, oh my gosh, you changed my baby's life, because you said, and I was like, look, I really do believe that parents, when you're growing up as a child, you don't really know you don't know until you don't know, but your parents have a lot of insight, or you're a mentor or anybody that's in your life daily and giving you that good guidance, and they're not going to intentionally try to steer you wrong. So maybe, maybe think about what they're saying a little bit. So I tell people that. But anyways, so I started researching, the military, and there's the Air Force Reserves, and they had flight attendants. And I was like, well, my mom's cute and she's a flight attendant, so I can do that. So I researched, and my recruiter was like, oh, we don't have flight attendants. I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, but it's on your website, sir. Don't you see that? And then he's like, so he came back to me 3 weeks later. He's like, you know what? We do have flight attendants. So that was a chore, just to try to even convince the Air Force that Air Force has flight attendants. But so I went down that path, and that kind of got me going. And my dad was really, supportive and encouraging. And then he passed away. And so when he passed away very suddenly, it was a very traumatic moment for me. I took some time for myself, but I started flying. I was like, my dad always wanted me to be a pilot. So let me go and see what this is about, And I always tell people, if you have an idea, the first thing you have to do is just take the first step. Don't think about it as some like really big, like, oh, I want to be a commercial pilot one day. Like, that wasn't my first thought. I was like, well, let me just go on a flight. Let's just see what this is like. And I loved it, never stopped, so that kind of got me on that path. And then, I was already in the Air Force, so reserves. So I just stuck with the Air Force, going to get commissioned and going through pilot training with a lot of encouragement and support along the way. So that's how I kind of got to where I am today, not knowing that I was ever going to be a history maker or anything like that. I just started flying as a way to deal with grief, and so it has been a blessing, and I'm happy to be in a position to be able to encourage others and bless others with that same thought. Yeah.
And so I guess thinking about how you said you started flying to deal with grief with your dad, and that was your, I guess, your impetus for transitioning into the cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what does a typical day or week look like for you as a pilot?
Oh gosh, it's just now starting. So, now that I'm a new first officer. So I guess, but I mean, I've been in the commercial industry for a long time. So, it's pretty standard as far as, I'll have maybe a 4-day trip, and, I'll be home for a few days and maybe go on another 4-day trip. And then I, am in the Georgia Air National Guard. So I do the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year. And both Endeavor Air and Delta Airlines are very, very supportive of veterans. So it's just so easy for them to work with my schedule. They give you time off if you need it to stay at home with your family. If you ask for it, if you're gone for, on a deployment or something like that, coming back, having that transition period. I mean, they're very supportive. So it's not as taxing. I tell people, I'm like, yeah, I technically have 3 jobs. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, it's great, because they are very supportive. So on a day-to-day basis, though, I guess, in the midst of this pandemic that we're in, my schedule is a lot more flexible than maybe what most people think, but it's just about, I work what I want to work. I do, I mean, as far as, if I want to go into the military and fly a couple extra flights this month, I have the flexibility to do that. If I want to pick up a trip, at Endeavor, I have the flexibility to do that. If I want to try to drop a trip, I could have the flexibility to do that. So, it's a great lifestyle plus benefits, So I fly for free. And I've always flown for free. Everyone always asks me about deals with delta.com and all that, and I'm like, I've never bought a ticket. I can't really give you a lot of great advice on like when to purchase the ticket, because I've never had one. And I will say this now, going back to, your initial question or comment about deciding what you want to do. For all those that are undecided, I would say, think about what you want your lifestyle to look like, So I growing up, a testament to my parents, like I traveled the world, I stayed in nice places, I had that experience, and I knew that I wanted to provide that for not just myself, but for my family as well one day. And so I only had jobs that were going to set me up for that. So even, you don't know this, but before I started, when I was in college, I worked for the Hilton. I worked front desk at the Hilton Garden Inn. It was a great job. I loved it. Had met some of my closest friends doing that job. But I had cheap hotel rooms, so even if I was driving
everything
down
was aligned before,
I was going to be able to stay at the Hilton for $39.99, and I was okay with that, So you have to think about what your lifestyle is going to look like, And I wanted to, be in a certain tax bracket. So, being a pilot was just the next step. So those things are important. I think people are shying away from talking about those things, but then also too, you have to think about, well, how expensive is it for me to get there? I went to pilot training for free. I joined the military serving my country for 10 years because they sent me to the world's best, pilot training program, but a lot of people pay, civilian to get those same ratings. They pay like hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans to get to. So you have to think about the path you want to take to get to where you want to be, and we don't talk about that often enough. You only talk to an attorney after they've gone through law school and they became an attorney, and they're like, I love my job, but they might not talk about, oh, I'm also, I have student loan debt, and I have, maybe I didn't graduate at the top of my class, or, things that were like the struggles in the path to get that. So then, yeah, you're probably in medical school and you think about dropping out, because you don't think about, well, how am I going to actually get to, the successful point? All you see is the success, but you don't see the struggles through to get to the success. And nobody talks about that. So then when they find out they're in the middle of it, they're like, oh my gosh, it's hard. I don't want to do it. And it's hard. It is. It's hard.
You have to do the work. And I think that's excellent advice that you provided. In, even though, like you said, you're working at Hilton in college, you knew the lifestyle you wanted, even though you weren't really necessarily sure of the career path that you wanted to sort of navigate once you graduated. And as a new pilot, could we maybe step back and maybe talk briefly about, since we're talking about what a traditional day looks like or week, has much changed since you were working as a flight attendant or compared to being a pilot in terms of your day-to-day?
As a new pilot, my day-to-day is constantly in flux. It's just, now it's starting to settle out more. I haven't been too much in the, professional civilian and military pilot portion of my life yet. But when I was a flight attendant, it's the schedule is different for flight attendants than they are for pilots. Your rest break isn't, well, at least at the time, it wasn't the same. Your duty day, is different, as far as how long you work. I mean, all of those things, are taken into account when you're scheduled. you know, as a flight attendant versus, you know, as a pilot. So, you know, for flight attendants, you know, your longest trip was 3 days, where pilots might be 5 days, you know. It just kind of just depends. So,
Oh, and this is wonderful information, because we'll have students that may not know the functions of a flight attendant or a pilot. So it's just more informational for them to have
yeah.
an understanding of what things look like. So thank you for laying that out for us.
Yeah, no, it's just a little bit different, but I will tell you, and like, and then as far as like being in training, you know, the training program for a flight attendant, at least at Delta Airlines, is it 7 weeks? I believe it's 7 weeks, or maybe a little bit longer now. But at any rate, it's about that time frame. Whereas, you know, I was in first officer training as a pilot for 3 months, so a little over 3 months, or you know, and then being a qualified pilot, you know, it takes years, you know, to get to that. So I, you know, moved to Oklahoma. I was in pilot training for a year and a half. Well, not quite a year and a half, but, you know, as far as all the training and stuff going. So I wasn't even at home, you know, and then, you know, you're on deployments, and, you know, a lot of things take into consideration when you're, you know, just specifically talking about, you know, being a pilot, military versus, you know, the civilian route. So that's just a little more insight to your question as far as what the day-to-day looks like, because it changes, you know, when you're deploying or you're in training or whatever. I mean, being a flight attendant, I was in training for 7 weeks, and that was at Delta. That was all you got, you know. And you're qualified on, you know, multiple aircrafts, whereas as a pilot, you're only on one. I mean, relatively speaking, you know, so you might fly different versions, but you're like, you know, I'm on a CRJ 200, and I will just fly the CRJ for right now. So there's so many differences with it, but I would just say, to answer your question, totally, the day-to-day life is, just depends on where you're at in your career.
Thank you. Thank you. And what skills, abilities, and personal attributes are essential to success in your career field?
The biggest thing that I tell people is that you have to have attention to detail, you know. So if you don't have attention to detail, I would work on that if you want to be a pilot. You can't let little things go unnoticed, you know. And that's something that you can get trained, you know, they'll work with you, you know, train you to. You don't have to be like, oh, I'm not good at math. A lot of people are like, oh, how is it in, you know, math? How's your math? And I'm like, I don't like math. I'm a pilot. I don't, you know, so don't think that just because you know, don't have these attributes that's something that's going to deter you away from doing whatever it is that you want to do, you know. I mean, maybe certain attributes are more important than others in certain career fields, but for being a pilot, I mean, I would say, you know, you don't have to be the best at math. I mean, you know, do math, but you don't have to be the best at it. And you know, attention to detail is something that's it's just big in the military, or, you know, anything, you know. Really all career fields, I mean, really expect for you to have attention to detail, you know. I mean, people's lives are, you know, doctors, attorneys, I mean, you can't miss those little things, that people's lives are at risk. I would also say you have to be on time. If you are late all the time, I will say this ain't for you. It's just, you cannot be late. You know, it actually drives me crazy when people are late. You know, because I can't just show up. I can't be like, oh, I had traffic and I'm sorry I was late for the, you know, not this meeting at 9 o'clock, and I showed up at 9:20, and, oh, I had to drop my kid. No, Delta, you were like, Delta does not care about your, like, why you're late, you know, per se. Not to say that they aren't, you know, empathetic, maybe, but they just, so, like, for example, like, I have my first trip on Saturday. My sign-in time is, I think, let's just say 3 o'clock. I'm going to leave. I live 15 minutes away from the airport and I'm leaving 2 hours early. Like, that's standard for me. You know, you cannot be late. So if you're late,
Thank you. I think that's a perfect example to highlight the importance of being not only on time but ahead of time. And even, you think about being a pilot, just getting there early to have your mind clear, have everything ready to go when you're there. And when you talked about the importance or the differences between being a flight attendant and being a pilot, and you were highlighting how they're different, I was already thinking about attention to detail and the importance. And as you mentioned, that's important in all careers, but especially an ever-changing day. So every day can be different. The elements that you are going to encounter can be different. And I guess the next question I was thinking about was how, as you mentioned, math or different challenges and overcoming them, how has a failure or apparent failure set you up later for success?
Yeah, I have failed a lot in my life. And I'm just being honest. I'm that person that I'm just going to tell you how my experience, and, it was not always, sunshine and rainbows. And, when I first started pilot training, and I hope it's okay if I'm candid with you, but I struggled. Like, every one of my training reports was like below average, unsatisfactory, the no situational awareness, like it was bleeding. My report, it was bleeding red. It was just not okay. I was almost kicked out of pilot training. In fact, they were like, you just don't have it, and because you have to be good, in a certain, syllabus, you can't just, well, try again tomorrow, and eventually run out. So I failed my first check ride, my first evaluation. I failed it. And so I think some things that I did to overcome it was I got to a point where I was desperate, and I asked those hard questions, those questions that you think you should know, so you're embarrassed to ask. I was like, I sat an instructor down, and I was like, look, I know I'm supposed to know this by now. Probably I don't. So help me. And they would sit down and help you. I mean, people are so willing, maybe they might say something behind your back. I don't know, but you can't be afraid of what someone thinks about you when you're doing something that, is life-changing, or, that's impactful. You just can't, you have to let your ego go. So, not that I have much of an ego, I just, I was always nervous. I was like that shy, timid person. Oh, that's another thing too. You can't be like, if you don't want anyone to tell you the things you need to change and how to get better and all that, if you're just really shy about those things, then this is not for you, because people are going to tell you, how many times have you been in an airplane and they landed and you were like, oh my God, that pilot can't land, It was like rough. And you're like, but I've spent thousands of hours landing this plane. And people are going to think that they just know how to fly airplane. It's just something that you have to just let all of that stuff go and be willing to ask the questions. That's how I deal with failure. And, my daddy always said, I'll give you a minute. You can cry about it today, but tomorrow we gonna fix this. This is gonna have to get. So I stick with that. I love that. Maybe in the evenings I might, watch my little Netflix show or or take a bubble bath or whatever you do to get your funk off, or, to let it go. But then come tomorrow, better come ready to work and ask those hard questions. And, not just to instructors, but your fellow classmates,
Exactly.
I had a whole, just like you talked about earlier, of having people that you're surrounded by to build you up. I mean, you have to have that. And that's only going to happen if you open up your mouth.
I
You
love
know?
that. And I think that's important for us as we navigate careers, to know that you shouldn't just feel alone or be alone if you're
Yeah.
overwhelmed or unfocused, but to ask your peers, ask your instructors, ask your supervisors for the help to get
Yeah.
you over. And in doing that, you're also demonstrating to other people, like, that's a leadership attribute in itself, to ask for help, because other people will see that as freeing, and then you could help someone else in an area that you have a stronger expertise in as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
And so then good news is that I graduated. So I got the help that I needed, and I did not fail a ride or anything after like that phase of my training that I was really struggling with. And I ended up graduating the top half of my class. So like, it's, it does make a difference. Absolutely. And I'm that person that, like, I'm that annoying kid that sits in the front of the classroom. I'm like, oh no, I gotta be closest to the board. We got to see each other so that when I ask the question, we can, we're right here. So
you don't want to miss any of
I
that
don't
wisdom
miss
and knowledge
anything. I'm
coming
like,
out.
I know me, and I gotta be right there. So I'm not that cool kid that sits in the back. Nope, I'm that dirty kid that sits in the front. And I raise my hand, excuse me. Like, I'm that, so, but that makes you sick. I mean, if you have to do it, I'm not saying you should, do that. But if that's what it's going to take, and you got to identify what is it going to take. And
If you want to grow, and if you want to be great, you have to be committed. And as you said at the very beginning, when you talked about like having a plan and sort of laying different things out, I think it's important that we do highlight focusing on how we're going to get there. So once you decided, even when you're reaching out in the Air Force about roles that even recruiters don't know about, you are able to find what you wanted, commit to it, and then create or chart a blueprint for how you have arrived there today and are still working to navigate your career. So I guess I'll go to another question, and then we will wrap things up. What advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world, or what advice should they ignore? However you want to approach it.
If I were to encounter someone who was in that position, I would say, I guess I would just ask them, okay, well, that's great. Well, how are you going to get there? Like, what's your plan? I always ask that question all the time. Mm-hmm. And usually people don't have a plan. They're like, this is, that they'll have, well, this is what I want. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a pilot. Okay, great. So how are you going to get there? You're smart. You've got the grades. You've shown the interest. You've gotten all those boxes checked. Well, how are you going to do it? What consequences are you going to, like, well, how are you going to pay for it? Is question number one. It's
developing a plan.
It's just developing, like, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do? What's your go? I call it a go, no go point, right? It's your V1. It's your point of decision. Like, well, is this going to work out or is this not? Do I have a plan B? Just planning is my thing. I got out, because you always, how, like, you're driving the car and, you get lost, and you can pull over into the next little parking lot and try to figure out where you're at, or make your little phone call to whoever you need to tell that you're going to be 20 minutes late or whatever. They don't do that in an airplane going 300 knots. You can't pull over and just be like, hold on now, I'm lost. Let me figure this out. Or something's broken. If something's broken, you're still going. The Lord's willing. It's, you just, so you don't have those moments to just kind of stop and think about what is the end result going to be. So I would say, just think about how you're going to get there. Whatever that is. It's probably not the best advice, but
I think it's wonderful advice for that question, because a lot of, and I mean, we can consider ourselves growing up as smart driven college students, but we might have not effectively planned everything out. And of course, hindsight can be 2020, as the saying goes. But I think every student that falls into that category might have missed something very important. So it's always unique to get the responses from the professionals who we ask that. And then the final question, wrapping things up, is what advice would you give to anyone considering a career in aviation?
If you're not flexible, this is not the career for you. Flexibility, I always say flexibility is key to air power. So if you are that person that you like your weekends and you like Christmas and Hanukkah and Thanksgiving and all that, you will spend a lot of Christmases away from home, a lot of holidays, birthdays, you'll miss out. There's one point where people were like, didn't even invite me to stuff because they just assumed that I wasn't going to be there. It's like a waste of an invitation. And I got, I had to tell them like, no, please, I just want to feel included. Like, that's just a real, because everything in aviation, at least from a commercial standpoint, and even to an extent military too with rank, but respectfully so, it's about longevity. It's about seniority, so if you are brand new on the line, you're not going to Christmas potentially. Like I'm not saying that's 100% of the
probably
time.
The least flexible time of your
career.
But
so if you're like, oh, I want to have Christmas, like plan things out 9 months beforehand, and this is what we're gonna do. Like, no, this ain't the career for you. You have to be. There have been plenty of times where even like the next day, I knew I was gonna make this event. I was like, oh, I would get home by 4:00, and go to the dinner at this birthday dinner at 8, and got weathered out and ended up having to lay over someplace else, or didn't get home till 1:00 in the morning, or some maintenance delay. Something has happened. You've planned this entire life, and things happen. But I would say that about anything. Any real, any major, career field, respectfully, like you could have anything happen.
There is that trade-off of sacrificing convenience or comfort for that flexibility, and commitment to the craft that you've been practicing. So yes.
So you have to be, dedicated to that. So that's what I would say. I probably lost a lot of votes on that answer, but for aviation, but people, you gotta know, because you're so sad. You get so depressed when you're like, oh, I can't go to that birthday dinner. I had been looking so forward to going to this birthday dinner, and then something happens, and now you're crying in your hotel room by yourself. And like, it's not okay. Like you should do what makes you happy, And if you really love being at family functions and dinners and things, and again, it's not to say this is forever, but for at least the first, couple of years or so, like you might miss. So what I do is, then the next, I know you're wrapping it up, but what I do
please
combat that is I have made my own holidays and birthdays and celebrate. You know what I mean? Like, not make my own, but like, if I can't be there for Christmas,
to celebrate,
then, on the 23rd, me and my family open presents, for Christmas, or we wait until the 26th to open presents and to have a big fancy dinner or something like that. Or, I'll, send my gift early to, the birthday, or we'll plan something later. There's so many, you don't have to make it just because it's like the day that everyone says it is. Like, just do what works for your family. So I've had a lot of numerous traditions, that my family and I just, started and do because my work schedule has been hectic over the years,
Mm-hmm.
So That's what it's all about, what you make it in this industry. So I really encourage you to get into it. And I thank you so much for your time and for thinking of me. I hope I made an impact in some but
Thank you. This was a
I'm very bubbly,
wonderful
so I
interview.
like to be candid and very, and if you have questions or want to, personally send me a message, don't forget to, like me or on Instagram, Aviator Andrea. That's me. So I can answer.
Aviator Andrea is your Instagram.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I appreciate your willingness to participate in the interviews with Career Cloud, but also I appreciate your being candid. I think this most effectively will prepare students. I have learned so much about the industry. This has just been a pleasure to just talk with you, learn from you, and get to know you. So I know that individual students, young adults, if you're looking to pursue a career, you can follow Captain Andrea Lewis on Instagram at Aviator Andrea. We also encourage you to follow Give Specific on Facebook and Instagram, as well as YouTube. Give Specific is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we encourage you to support our efforts and interviews like this one by donating. You can visit givespecific.org to find out more. And again, thank you so much for your willingness to come in and provide your wisdom as you move forward your career field. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Say bye, Connor.
And what is your dog's name?
His name is Connor. Well, he's not my dog. I can't have a dog.
Dog, right?
This is my nephew dog, my sister's dog.
Oh, hi, Connor.